Archaeopteryx. Its name rightfully means ancient wing. It was originally named from a single fossilized feather imprint, but later a whole skeleton was found that became the specimen for which all Archaeopteryx would be known. Because of the immaculately preserved feather imprints on the skeleton fossil, it is the first dinosaur to have been found, with evidence pointing to the animals being birds of some sort. However, it should be noted that it is not the earliest known bird. Let's go over the history of this beautiful dinosaur. In Germany, there are slate deposits that are wonderfully plentiful in fossils. In one of these deposits, a sheet of slate was split in half to reveal a wonderfully preserved fossil specimen with detailed imprints of not only its bones, but of derived feathers, much like those that we see in modern birds. Considering how recent feathered dinosaurs are in the public eye, it may seem like a find from 1999 or so. Would you be shocked if I told you it was unearthed in 1860 or 1861? The year seems slightly disputed. Yes, my viewer, you heard that right. The initial Archaeopteryx specimen is 40 years off of being 200 years old. So, why were dinosaurs depicted as slow, dumb lizards when we had Archaeopteryx? Well, this goes back to a few points in early paleontology. Archaeopteryx was at first classified as a bird instead of a dinosaur because of its feathers, its wings, breastbone, wishbone, and other bird-like features. This was directly in spite of many dinosaur-like features it possessed, such as individual fingers, claws, a long bony tail, and teeth. However, in 1868, it was suggested that it was indeed a dinosaur. This led to other paleontologists suggesting that dinosaurs were more bird-like in general, but the notion was, at that point in time, rejected. See, early paleontologists had a thought in their head that dinosaurs were just waiting around to go extinct. They thought these animals were too slow and too dumb, mainly because they were unfamiliar. Not only were they unfamiliar, but they challenged views of the Earth that the main paleontologists of the Western Hemisphere had inherently. Look, I don't want to get into touchy topics much, but sometimes they play a crucial part in history. I myself am atheistic, and I do not believe in any higher power, singular or plural, but from that, I can also say that I take no issue with religion inherently. It is their actions that bother me. And one of their actions was the early paleontologists' attempts to force dinosaurs into a slot in their creation myths that they simply did not fit into. Because creationist Christians believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, as the Bible itself says, they came to believe that dinosaurs were inherently worse creatures in all aspects. They needed dinosaurs to fit into a box so that they could point and say, "Oh, look at those pitiful creatures. How sad of an existence they must have had. They could not even support their own weight with their legs. Oh, they must be so slow. It was only a matter of time before we took their place." We have to face it. Early paleontologists had harsh biases, but we also have to face that we today have our biases as well. For instance, I think Therizinosaurus' claws were used for combat. Some say that their claws were too weak, and I disagree. I think part of my disagreement is in how cool the combat would be with such large claws, while the other part is my belief that paleontologists are too quick to disregard certain structures as quote-unquote too weak. With that in mind, it's natural for paleontologists from the 1800s to reject the notion that Archaeopteryx was a dinosaur. Lucky for us, paleontologists today understand that Archaeopteryx was a stem bird, a transitional species that only just began to define a new animal family, if that's the right word I'm looking for. Oh, you're gonna leave me? Well, goodbye. Just recording. Rude. So, how did Archaeopteryx look? Oh boy, you guys are going to be so excited to hear this. So, Therizinosaurus had only its arms, right? Meaning that most of the dinosaurs' looks were speculated, remember? Archaeopteryx was the complete opposite. We know so much about how it looked down to what color it was. Picture, if you will, a common raven. 20 inches was the general length for an Archaeopteryx, that's 50 centimeters. So it was a small animal, pet-sized for a dinosaur, if you ask me. Beautiful black feathers adorned it almost all over, only leaving its head and neck bare, like a vulture. Upon its lengthy-looking arms, an impressive fan of feathers grew. These stem wings would be able to carry the animal's body weight, but not for too long. While Archaeopteryx had a breastbone and wishbone, those are separate if you're, not aware. These were not as developed as what modern birds today have, meaning it could not execute flapping motions as well or with the same movement range. This would regulate it to being just a low flyer, perhaps only lifting itself into the air to escape predators or ambush prey. Aiding in its flying, however, would be a fan of feathers on its tail. These feathers were long and flat, giving the tip of the tail a sort of like the end of a piece of silverware, where it's rounded and flat but tapers into a thicker shape. These feathers would help Archaeopteryx to keep its balance in the air, which would be necessary to, not go crashing into the sand of where it lived. Speaking of where it lived, it likely lived on a beachy, almost desert area, surrounded by ocean, with little vegetation. This animal wasn't quite adapted for climbing after all. This gives a rather picturesque scene to my mind of a sandy oasis beach, calmly being lapped upon by aqua waves adorned with white foam. Down walks a little bird-looking creature, bobbing its head as it walks its strides with caution yet intrigue. It looks out upon the waves, accented with golden pinks by a setting sun. Though it does not think of worlds beyond its territory, the Archaeopteryx looks out anyway, out of curiosity for the glimmering shine on the ocean. Well, that's about it for me. I didn't expect the Archaeopteryx to excite me like it did, but it was great to read up on. The fossil to later be appointed its holotype is one that's very well known, but might not be recognized for its species so easily. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the Archaeopteryx I've drawn for you today. I am Bindu, that 90s radical failure, I guess, and I'll see you alongside the next terrible lizard.